Just a reminder to stay on mute unless you're called upon to speak. The time is now 2:03 p.m. We will now begin with remarks from Mitzie Hunter, MPP for Scarborough-Guildwood and Ontario Liberal Party critic for Finance, Treasury, Energy, Anti-Racism Directorate, and Democratic Renewal and Electoral Reform.
Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today. And I'm Mitzie Hunter, MPP for Scarborough-Guildwood. I'd like to take a moment to say how deeply saddened I am by the news and the images that have been emerging from Russia's unprovoked invasion of its sovereign neighbor. It is important that we continue to stand with Ukraine and its people, including our Ukrainian Canadian community here in Ontario. As democratically elected representatives, it is important to stand up and take action against all acts of violence and hate. And it is what brings us here today. I'm so thankful that all of you have joined. On behalf of the Ontario Liberal Caucus, I want to express my strong support for our London Family Act, Bill 86, and its immediate passage through the legislature. Bill 86 and its various acts to combat Islamophobia and hatred is an important stance against hate in Ontario. This bill underscores the fact that we need to take action to address Islamophobia, white supremacist groups, and hate in Ontario. I firmly believe that the only acceptable response to such hate that lurks in our midst is collective and unequivocal condemnation. And that is why I immediately put forth a motion in the provincial legislature condemning Islamophobia in June of 2021, immediately following the horrific situation that had taken place in London. And it is also why I support Bill 86 today. The terrible sorrow and grief that followed the senseless killing of 4 members of the Afzal family in London, Ontario, demands a response from our province. Today, we have a bill that is the product of the hard work and strong advocacy of the community members and organizations like the National Council for Canadian Muslims and members of the Scarborough Muslim Association. Together, these voices have made it clear Muslims in Scarborough, Ontario, and Canada, they want to live peacefully, free of fear of facing threats for simply having and displaying their faith and beliefs. They want to be treated respectfully, fairly, and justly. They want to know that they belong too. The time for words is over. The time for action has arrived, as evident in the introduction of safe zones around religious institutions, which frankly is the Charter of Rights and Freedom guarantees that. I support the Our London Family Act because it is grounded in the NCCM's recommendations to the National Summit on Islamophobia. The calls to action highlighted by the NCCM revealed an urgent need to introduce legislation designed to address many disturbing realities for too long have been part of the Canadian Muslim experience. I have confidence that together we can bring this change that is needed. I want to thank my colleagues from the NDP for introducing this bill. As a member of the provincial legislature, I am committed to making our communities and our province as a whole a safer place for all to live, to work, to go to school, and to worship, regardless of religion. Before I close, I hope it's okay for those that are here that I say the names of the victims of the London, Ontario attack. Salman Afzal, Mediha Salman, Yumna Afzal, Talat Afzal, And I just want to send all of my hopes and prayers to their son, grandson, and brother, Faiz. Thank you all.
Thank you, MPP Hunter. Next, we have Mike Schreiner, MPP for Guelph and leader of the Green Party of Ontario.
Thank you. And it's an honor to join all of you today. And I too want to express my unequivocal condemnation of the aggression of Russia in their invasion of Ukraine, and stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian Canadians, and say how important it is at this particular moment in time when we see the rise of white supremacist groups, hate groups, and people who engage in violence, that we stand united as a province to stand up against hate, against lawless aggression, and against violence towards anyone. And that's one of the reasons we are here today. The Ontario Green Party fully and unequivocally supports the Our London Family Act. And I want to say how much I deeply appreciate the National Council of Canadian Muslims for all the hard work you've done to thoughtfully put forward this piece of legislation and to work with all parties and all members of the Ontario legislature. You know, I confirmed our party's commitment to doing whatever we could to pass this bill when I met with the NCCM back in November, and I am pleased to confirm it once again today. Greens will do whatever we can, and we will work across party lines to combat Islamophobia in this province. Because I believe we need a united effort across religious, party, partisan lines to stand up and eradicate Islamophobia, to fight against the rise of white supremacy movements, and to steadfastly stand against hate in this province. And this is not a partisan issue. And that's why I want to thank my NDP colleagues for bringing forward this bill. And I just want to say how much I appreciate and thank MPP Mitzie Hunter and the Liberal caucus for one, helping to organize today's press conference, but also standing steadfastly in support of the Our London Family Act as well. What happened in London in June was truly devastating, a truly devastating act of terrorism. And my heart goes out to the Abdulfatah family and to all members of the Muslim community across London, Ontario, and Canada. It's the responsibility of all governments to not only offer thoughts and prayers, but to also take action to ensure that another tragedy like this does not happen again. And the only way we can take concrete action, especially enduring concrete action, is if we put politics aside and make real progress on tackling hate and Islamophobia here and now with legislative action. And I want to say that people who look like me, and I said this in London at the vigil, people who look like me have a special responsibility to speak out against the rising levels of white supremacy, Islamophobia, and hate in our province and across the country, and to stand in solidarity with the Muslim community. It's the responsibility of all governments to take concrete actions to ensure that we put a stop to any more tragedies like the London attack. No family, no individual, no child should fear for their safety or to be targeted in the way the Abdulfatah family was. And this is why the Ontario Greens support the National Council of Canadian Muslims, Our Family Act. And once again, I just want to thank NCCM on your hard work on this important bill. And I look forward to working across party lines to make it legislation in Ontario. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, MPP Schreiner. Next, we have Mustafa Farook, Chief Executive Officer of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, NCCM.
Thank you very much. So my name is Mustafa Farook, and I am the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. I think before I say anything else, I think it's, we've all been seeing and hearing today about violence abroad today. And I think as Leader Schreiner just noted, it's why we're here today as well, to challenge violence and hate everywhere. First of all, before I say anything else, I want to thank Leader Del Duca, MPP Hunter, as well as Leader Schreiner for working diligently with us and without hesitation, and your support from day one to translate words to action. I'm here because last year, a family lost 3 generations in a single night in the London terror attack. The family and then their names live on in our memory. 1 year ago in Etobicoke, Mohammed Aslam Zavis, a man I knew, was killed at the IMO Mosque in Toronto at the hands of a man with links to a white supremacist group. Ontario has lost far too many people to Islamophobia far too recently. This cannot be allowed to continue. In the aftermath of the London terror attack, standing on the door the doors in front of the London Muslim Mosque, there was a call for change. We saw all of our party leaders promise swift and decisive action to confront Islamophobia. Yesterday, we saw a historic step towards that action through the introduction of Bill 86, the Our London Family Act, working together to combat Islamophobia and hatred, entered into Queen's Park by the Ontario NDP and Leader Andrew Horwath. The Our London Family Act, a draft piece of model legislation, proposes key and common sense changes to the way that we challenge Islamophobia in Ontario. It brings changes to our education system, to the way that we deal with hate crimes in this province, to human rights legislation reform. Let us be clear, these are common sense changes. Every party has committed to action. Now it's simply about political will. This proposed act is a culmination of what we heard in hundreds and thousands of conversations and submissions sent to us, and in consultation from coast to coast with a diversity of Ontario Muslims along the lines of gender, race, and class. The proposed changes in this piece of legislation are clear. We need to see action, and we need to see it now. As our parties, in Queen's Park prepare for an election in the spring, our call is simple: no more violence. Our communities cannot wait until after the election for change. We are calling on everyone across party lines. Now let's work to make this bill pass before the spring election. And again, I have to say that we have been so incredibly heartened to see folks step up and commit to making sure that they step up so that it passes. I want to again thank Leader Del Duca, who's not on the call here, but MPP Hunter, thank you. Thank you as well, Leader Schreiner. I think we have a commitment to support and principle from the Ford government. And now we must work hard to make sure that real change is passed and before the spring election. Let us go forward. Let us go forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farook. Next we have is Mohammed Feki, philanthropist, activist, and CEO of Paramount High Foods.
Thank you so much, and hello, everyone. And not long ago, I spoke to a group of young people just starting out in their adult lives. It was a very diverse and impressive group. These are people who see themselves as future leaders. They're excited about the future, as any young person should be, but they're also concerned. They are uneasy. They see what happened in London. They hear about it. And many of them experience prejudice and intolerance in their own lives. I experienced that. I've spent 4 years fighting it. And until today, we can't get the person in jail despite many judgments against him. Those young leaders feel that something is changing, and they worry. They worry that nothing is being done to stop. After the hateful attack in London last June, our leader came together. They attended the vigil. They all said the right things. I know that Muslims across our province appreciated that. But then what happened? Not enough. Standing up to hate, taking a stand, making a real statement calls for a consistent approach each and every day. That is what's required in order to align with the principle and ideals of our country. And what we need as a community and as a country is for our leaders to come together like this, not only to condemn hate, but to do much, much more to prevent it, to punish it, and to do better, and to better protect those who are the target of hate. Hate isn't abstract, isn't theoretical. As we saw in London, hate has consequences. It can alter the course of a life or end it. Here in Ontario, in Canada, we cannot allow the space for hate to grow and to thrive. We can't change every single mind, we know that. We can't root out every racist. But there are things that we can all do. And especially political leaders, they need to show that they have the real political will, and they need to push to pass this bill. And that's why I will continue to champion the Our London Family Act among a lot of people in the community and outside our community, because I believe that we need to take action, and we need it now, because I know that hate grows in silence and feeds on indifference. Our community is tired to keep explaining to our children why this continues happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feki. Next, we have Omar Faluk, President of the IMO Mosque.
Thank you very much for inviting me once again. You know, it's really hard to believe that 1.5 years will soon pass when we lost our dear and loving brother, Mohammed Aslam Zafas. He was murdered while simply standing at the IMO Mosque entrance, serving our congregation in the path of God. His murderer was motivated by hate. A day does not go by without me recalling the shocking scene. The images seared into my memory of flashing lights, of police vehicles, paramedics, and police tapes surrounding the IMO parking lot. Mohammed's killing and the hate-motivated killing of the Afzal family in London are still echoing across the country, and they have become inextricably linked in the fight against Islamophobia. Islamophobia has no place in our civilized society. It is counterproductive to multiculturalism. It undermines our ability to feel safe in our very own communities. It will not disappear overnight. Despite that, we feel the relief and encouragement due to the progress made by Brother Mustafa Farook, CEO of NCCM, and his fantastic team against the challenges of discrimination that Muslims are facing day in and day out. Today, we are pleased to see real action taken to address discrimination, hate, and Islamophobia through the introduction of our London Family Act. It is our hope that all MPPs will support the passage of this legislation now. In addition, I sincerely hope this will go a long way towards ending attacks and discrimination against Muslims. We should continue to stand as a united bulwark against the architects of hate to eliminate their foothold in our society. Thanks to everyone who have stand beside us. May God be with each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farook. Next, we have Sabir Khan, Muslim Association of Canada and friend of our London family. Mr. Khan, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sabir. I want to start off by thanking everyone, starting with the NCCM for all the work they have done in putting this forward, the NDP party, Liberals, the Green Party, and everyone for coming together and moving this forward and understanding how critical this is to stop what has happened in the past and make sure we pave a way that is positive and aligned with our values as Canadians. And it's wonderful to see how this unfortunate tragedy has brought everyone together on a very important matter. We have seen the NDP take a lead on this, but it's a nonpartisan matter and supported by everyone across the political spectrum. This is something the family continues to struggle with from their loss, but it's wonderful to see that hopefully this will not happen again. Time is an urgent thing that is not on our side, and the family, in my conversations with them, would request that everyone continue to put their utmost efforts in pushing this act forward. I also lead the Muslim Association of Canada's local chapter here, and we need support as organizations, as local organizations, to help our efforts of education and community outreach efforts. And again, I believe there's aspects of this act that will address that to ensure our institutions are protected and our community has a sense of safety and security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Next, we have Iman Abdulfatah, Twaqab, Canadian Council of Imams, London.
Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. First, I'd like to offer a few words in terms of understanding what is happening on the world stage. Is a stark reminder of the impacts that any form of aggression and violence can have on innocent human lives. Just as we in our local community in London, Ontario, experienced last June the loss of 4 members of our community spanning 3 generations. This is to say that the impact of unjustified acts of violence and aggression and hatred are real. As imams that serve within our communities, we are on the front lines when we are to respond to our community members when they come to us and tell us about the various forms of hatred that they experience. And so I want to say thank you to the NDP caucus and leader Horwath for tabling the piece of legislation, our London Family Act, as well as the Liberal caucus, the provincial Liberal caucus, and the MPP Hunter and leader Schreiner for their support of our London Family Act. This is the single largest piece of legislation tabled dealing with Islamophobia in North America. And so this is a historic milestone for our province. And what lays before us is an opportunity to lead by example. We have an opportunity that after the introduction of this legislation, and hopefully with the passage of this legislation, this is not an end, but rather this is a means and this is a beginning for the work that needs to take place. And we're very grateful for the NCCM for putting forth this piece of legislation, because at the end of the day, this is one part of many aspects that we need in order to fight the various forms of hatred, racism, discrimination, and Islamophobia in our society on all levels, whether it's at an individual level or whether it's on a systemic level. But the only way that we will be able to defeat Islamophobia and the various other forms of racism, hatred, and discrimination within our society is together. That is the only way to move forward. And so I'm very grateful. And on behalf of the Canadian Council of Imams, we are very grateful for the support that our London Family Act has received up until this point. And we hope that its passage in the legislature will take place sooner rather than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imam Twakal. We'll now move to question and answer. As a reminder, please stay on mute until you're called upon. Reporters, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom function or leave your name in the chat with the name of your outlet. Thank you. The first question goes to Adam Donaldson of Guelph Politico. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is about the political situation in Queen's Park. I mean, there's only so many weeks left before the end of the session. So I guess this is directed to Ms. Hunter and Mr. Schreiner. Just, do you have the confidence that there's enough time left in the session to make this a reality? And I guess how do you overcome the typical mechanisms in the legislature to make sure it gets done in time?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll hand it over to MPP Schreiner. So there definitely is enough time in the legislature. I can tell you if there's enough time to pass the budget, there's enough time to pass this bill. It's a private member's co-sponsored bill, and my understanding is that that there is a debate time that has been set aside for it on March the 10th to debate a second reading of the bill. And from there, it would need to be studied at committee to make any improvements to the bill. And it is up to Premier Ford and his government to call the bill back from committee. And I was really encouraged to hear from Mustafa this morning that, or this afternoon, that he has heard some commitments in principle from members of the Ford government, because really at the end of the day, you've heard wholeheartedly the Ontario Liberal Caucus's support for the Our London Families Act. MPP Schreiner is here for the Greens saying that he supports. So really, to get this through, the commitment from the PC government would do it.
Yeah, I'll just add to MPP Hunter's words to say that there's plenty of time in the legislative calendar to pass this bill if the government wishes it to pass. I've personally reached out to the government House Leader to ask him if he would consider any steps that could be taken to help fast track the bill. Also reached out to MPP Rashid in the Conservative Caucus as well, who has spoken in general about supporting the Our London Family Act. And I'm quite confident in the work that Mustafa and his team has done to bring people together around this particular bill. And obviously, if the government has concerns with maybe specific parts of the bill, we have an opportunity at committee to make those kinds of adjustments and have it passed before this sitting of the legislature ends.
I do see Adam's hand still raised. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I thank you. I did have a follow-up. It's directed to the rest of the distinguished panel here. One of you or all of you might want to comment, but to follow up on what Mr. Schreiner said earlier about how people who look like him and frankly me, the responsibility we have. I imagine there's widespread support for this in the province, but in terms of like the community level, people who are, understand the situation, see the hate on the rise, want to take action in their own communities. What's like the best way or the best advice you can give people if they want to take action against hate on an individual basis in their own community?
Maybe Mustafa, you could begin.
Sure, I'm actually, if that's okay, I'm going to defer it maybe to Iman Abdulfatah or Mohammed Feki, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
Out of respect, go ahead, Imam, please.
Thank you. So really, when it comes to being able to combat the various forms of discrimination and racism on an individual level, it's important that a person is able to be self-critical, to be able to examine within themselves that do they have any sort of implicit biases within them that they don't necessarily are consciously aware of. And so that's always the first step is really not to be afraid, to have courage to be critical of oneself and to be able to look deeply within oneself to see if they do have any sorts of these views that or they might be contributing inadvertently to this the various forms of hatred that might exist. I've had personal conversations with individuals who it wasn't until they made a conscious choice to look within themselves and to say, do I want to be this individual that spreads hatred? Do I want to be this individual that spreads racist views or that can lead to acts of violence? If I don't want to be that individual, then I have to make a change within myself. And that's something that for every single person, across the board, to be able to constantly examine themselves and then to work and to be able to support those community efforts that are continuing to increase in order to be able to help combat the various forms of discrimination and racism that exist, including Islamophobia, within our societies.
And I would add, it's not only people that looks like anyone, including our Muslim community, and a lot of times immigrants are don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be looked at like a troublemakers by reporting act of hate or intolerance. I think number one, people need to report more often. And for the people that they actually witness someone else being subjected to hate, they need to actually stand up, speak out, and post their views, share their views, and more often break bread together with people that make them feel that they're not alone. When I was attacked by haters, I didn't need the money. I didn't need anything else different than people taking me for a coffee and making me feel that I wasn't alone. And mostly what you hear when you're subjected to hate, that don't worry about them, they're crazy, they're not important people, it's only one person, let it go. And I think our silence is becoming the reason why we're emboldening the haters. And I think if we speak out and stand up against them, we'll push them back to the shadow where we all need them. And it doesn't matter how we look like. We simply all need them to go back to the shadow. We saw what happened in Ottawa. We're seeing what was happening. We saw what happened, unfortunately, in London. We saw what happened with a lot of people that they were subjected to hate. Silence is not working anymore. We need to speak out, we need to stand up, and we need to take real action, and all of us together to protect Canada. All of us, we need to do it.
Thank you. Any more questions? All right, thank you for everyone for joining us today. That concludes today's news conference.